various pieces of coverage of an extraordinary book that is now being released in paperback. I read the Daily Mirror. I was a brainwashed Taliban suicide bomber, but a biology class saved my life. At 16 years old, Maiwand Banayee was preparing to become a suicide bomber. Then he saw the true horrors of the Taliban firsthand. Maiwand Banayee is an NHS physiotherapist. He, as I say, aspired for that as a teenager, and he's now author of the book Delusions of Paradise, Escaping the Life of a Taliban Fighter, and privileged to say he's with me in the studio now. Maiwand, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Henry, and it's a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. It's a remarkable story. It's difficult to know where to start. Shall we start at the age of 14, when you fled Afghanistan and you obviously then moved to Pakistan? Just walk us through your what happened at that age.
Yeah, I was about 12 years of age when the American-backed Mujahideen took over and the Russian-backed communist regime collapsed there. And then the warlords turned their guns on each other and a severe civil war erupted. During that civil war, I remained stranded for nearly 2 years where I saw the best and the worst that humanity can offer. So the horror that I witnessed during that war, no child should ever have to see it again. To cut the long story short, and then when my brother disappeared as well, so I fled with my family to refugee camps, to a refugee camp known as Shamshatur refugee camp at the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that was one of the 150 refugee camps that had already been built for Afghan refugees who had fled anti-Soviet war. So that environment was really ripe for kind of radicalism and extremisms, and the camp environment was completely infused with religious fervor. So everything was biblical, and everyone had a story to tell and a tragedy to share. I mean, as much as that structure of the refugee camps was kind of resembling 7th century Saudi Arabia, and so was the thought and mentality of people. So everyone wanted to kind of emulate Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Muhammad's companion, how they lived during the 7th or 8th century Saudi Arabia. The only school available were madrasas, religious seminaries. And then I was really influenced by that culture. I had no other option, and then got admission into a madrasa. When you get admission into madrasa, you become talib. It means students there. So basically in madrasa, I live with bygone stories of Prophet Muhammad companions, how bravely they fought, their sacrifices and their stories. I was taught that democracy went against Islam, the apostates should be killed, that Islam should dominate, and it was every Muslim's obligation in order to establish Sharia, God's laws on God earth, be it at expense of our kind of the life as well. So because we needed an armed jihad in order to bring about Sharia. And if we were to kind of attain martyrdom, that would be the highest honor in Islam, and they would lionize the martyred and then glorify their afterlife with absolute kind of comforts. And they would back up this with the Quranic verses that says that martyr truly never dies, or God has purchased from the believer their properties and their kind of soul in exchange for paradise. So again, and then only the myths around, martyrdom or martyred was abounded everywhere in the mosque, in the streets. You would often hear people saying such and such person unburied a shaheed's body or martyred body after so many years. His body was intact and he smelled of kind of musk. Or people would say, a shaheed rose from the dead and clasped his father's hand. Or maybe like dog refused to eat shaheed's body, but they ate communists. So again, at that stage, the Russian had been defeated, but the people there were really kind of drunk with the euphoria of jihad and martyrdom. They were seeing a kind of a divine hands. So living there over a year, I really fell for those myths there, and I accept them as a truth. And then when you're living in an environment, riddled with abject poverty, no woman.
Well, you're angry as well, as you're saying about your experience in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You're vulnerable.
Definitely,
You're there and you're being taught extreme views.
Yeah.
You're being taught in some ways conspiracy theories,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
And so we reach a point where you are you're stirred by these stories of jihad.
Definitely.
And in the late 90s, what happens? When the Taliban seize power in Afghanistan, you're presumably thinking you want to go and practice
in
this.
1996, once the Taliban took over, I wanted to kind of put those fantasies that I had into practice, and I said that was the opportunity that we can establish Sharia, and then kind of fight for elevation of Allah's words, and then if I were to achieve martyrdom, that would be the biggest honor. But in the meantime, in those refugee camps, I was attending a lot of jihadi jalasa conferences as well. They would show us, the pictures of decapitating children in Palestine and demolish mosque in Lebanon, and they would feed us a lot of conspiracy theory presenting the Western world as savage, cruel, and inhuman, and saying that every bad thing that happened in the Muslim world was infidels' plot. So I was really influenced by those stories. That's where, I traveled in 1996. My cousin were already fighting for the Taliban. So I learned, shooting with them, and I wanted to be deployed, to the north, with a sole mission to participate in jihad and to be killed.
And you were very close. I read, was it there was a family situation with your father?
Yeah, then my father tracked me down. He tracked me down, and he came after, and then had quarrel with my cousin that he was.
And where was your father at this point?
He was in the refugee camps. Definitely,
right.
yeah. And then I didn't want to escalate their fight, and then I just went along with my father. But again, I fled home, and then I wanted to join the Haqqaniya Madrasa, one of the biggest endorser of the Taliban. But that mission were kind of closed for that year, and I put my name for the next year. And then again, I fled home as well in 1997. I wanted to join battalion directly with it, involving my cousins. But en route, I saw a lot of Taliban excesses, but at that time, there were rumors as well that Pakistan was supporting the Taliban. And at that time, some doubt, creeped inside me, because I thought if the Pakistan regime was a secular, if they were kind of supporting the Taliban, if I were to achieve martyrdom, would I be considered, a pure martyr, because we were kind of not fighting, the pure infidels yet, yeah.
But what actually stopped you? So it was the physical thing of your father tracking you down.
Yeah.
But at what point did you think, actually, sort of, what am I getting myself? What am I believing here?
Yeah. So there were two phases. On one phase, when I lost, passion for the Taliban, that was when I was traveling again to join a battalion directly. The bus was stopped one time. We prayed the noon prayer, and then the bus traveled a few miles down the road, and then again the bus was stopped by the Taliban. They were forcing us to kind of pray again, people. But I acted a bit cocky, and I said that was not the way that you were kind of preaching Islam. And then he said if I didn't shut my mouth, he would bury 30 bullets in my stomach. That didn't resonate with me well, and then it just really hurt my ego. But then when we went to the Kabul with one of my relatives, I went to watch the execution ceremony there. A man was given a gun to kill his brother's murderer. It really didn't resonate with me. I really closed my eyes. And then again, two other men were brought, they chopped their hands.
Really?
Yeah, that was again, I closed my eyes. And then when I was traveling from Kabul back to my cousin, to our village there, my hat was blown off by the wind. And then once I got down from the bus, they were asking me, some of them, they came there, they wanted to kind of shave my hair, because they said that you are not covering your head, you are imitating infidels. So they were really micromanaging everything. And again, at that time, I heard that rumors of their being backed up by Pakistan. So I just kind of some doubt developed. But then how I lost kind of my faith in this entire ideology, I have captured this, my emotional odyssey in the book. So every questions and every doubt was a crack in my faith. But in largely when I was, because when I came back there, as I was waiting for Haqqaniya Madrasa, and then our day madrasa shut its door, and my father was hounding me to do something with life. So I just wanted to keep him shut, and then I got admission in a kind of more of a secular school away from the refugee camp. There I was exposed to kind of other literature outside of jihad. Once I began reading in different people as well, they were lads, who hadn't been brought up, around the stories of martyrdom and jihad. They had different outlook on life. They were shaving their beard, and they were kind of watching Indian movies. So that really influenced me. And then some doubt developed once I was studying science subject. It was contradicting what was Quran saying. For example, the Quran said that semen was made between backbone and ribs. When I studied in biology, they were saying that it was made in testes, and also with the earth as well. Quran was giving a kind of flat earth view, and then we were studying in geology that it was kind of not flat, it was roundish. So over time, that's where, every crack, it was an incremental procedure that I lost, faith in the entire ideology. Yeah.
Do you ever think back to those presumably friends they would have been at the time when you were in that, when you were in the refugee camp, but when you were specifically, if we look back to the madrasas as you were talking about, do you ever think back to those former acquaintances of yours?
Yeah, well, many of them, they carried out suicide mission. Some of them became big Taliban members. They graduated from madrasa. Because they held into that mindset. I was lucky enough because to have been able to break away from that mindset. Had it not been for certain events, I could have been one of them. That's why I wrote this book there, because I was brainwashed and I was indoctrinated. But I was lucky enough that I was able to break away from that mindset, and now I want to expose that system that fostered that type of mindsets. I don't excuse their action, but inherently they were not bad people. I think they were just victim of an ideology and certain type of brainwashing at that stage. Yeah.
What made you write the book? Clearly it's a remarkable story, but I sense part of you wants to influence as well, and wants to get this point across to obviously a country that, as we know, is now very much firmly in the grip of the Taliban once again.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when I look back on that young man myself, the false narrative in Delusion I took as truth, I feel sorry for myself. And then I was shuddering with fear, of today's generation of young men and women, again, living under the Taliban regime, and they're being indoctrinated into destructive ideology of jihadism and martyrdom. That's I wrote this book because once I was green and naive, any kind of teaching my madrasa teacher put forth, I accepted him as a truth. Some of the lad whom I studied with, they went and carried out a suicide bombing and then became jihadis. That's why they were this victim of that bad kind of circumstances or ideologies there. So my main aim is, because I want to prevent others as well, and then expose a system, how it leads, for somebody, to completely shut its rational faculties and think of something heinous, that thinking that by doing that they could immortalize himself and then get to a life that's just only based on myths and false stories.
Can you talk to me lastly about your journey in the UK? The issue of asylum is one that is heavily debated in the UK. Am I right in saying you moved to Ireland and then you came to... what was your...
Initially, I came to the UK and then I stayed there and then my asylum application was refused. And then I lived about nearly 2 years illegally here, and then from there I moved to Ireland. But it is difficult. Initially when I came, I was like a fish out of the tank, the people, like the roads and the air, everything was new. And it was just kind of everything was clean, and I really liked the freedom. But then once the asylum application is refused, it becomes really difficult. You're not allowed to have work, you're not allowed to have a bank account, you're not allowed to have educations. Your body doesn't belong to you. Anytime immigration can come and pick it and throw it in a truck or somewhere and then deport it back. And it becomes difficult. You feel, like you're just like a caged bird, with broken wings, seeing other birds flying. It is not easy, yeah.
And a job as a physiotherapist in the NHS now?
Yeah. And then I went to Ireland. In Ireland as well, I stayed in asylum seeker hostel for about 3 years, where I was surviving on 16 euro a week with 3 times food. Again, I was not allowed at that time to have educations, visitors, and traveling and anything like that. But once got admission, by then I had improved my English, and I did a degree in athletic therapy and sports injury rehabilitation. Right. And then after that, I did a kind of postgraduate in neuromuscular therapy from Chester University, but now I completed my kind of physiotherapy, MSc in physiotherapy in leadership. Yeah.
It's a remarkable story. Thank you so much for coming by to see us today in the studio. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. I'm humble and honored, Henry.
Thank you. It's Maiwand Banayee, the NHS physiotherapist. He aspired to become a Taliban suicide bomber, as you heard there, as a teenager. He's author of the book. In fact, Andy says, fascinating, Henry. What's the name of the book, please? I must buy it. It is called Delusions of Paradise, Escaping the Life of a Taliban Fighter.